Canada just killed its immigration boom. My friend Ben Rabideau said it best here on Twitter, pointing out that the federal budget basically throws the Trudeau government under the bus on the immigration file, commits to reducing temporary residents, and actually targets negative population growth. You can see it dip below zero. You heard that right. Negative population growth. After adding over 3 million people in just 4 years, the federal government is now slamming the brakes on immigration harder than ever before. The Carney government's new budget cuts the number of foreign student visas by half, from 305,000 to around 150,000 next year. And it freezes permanent immigration at 380,000 a year until at least 2028. For a country that's built its entire growth model on newcomers, this is a complete policy reversal. If you look at chart 17 from the budget, it shows basically how population growth went vertical after 2020 during the Trudeau government's sort of labor shortage filling phase. And then it collapsed straight down after policymakers were dealing with a ton of pushback from the public on this policy. Finance Canada literally projects zero, even potentially negative population growth for the first time in modern history. And now the question is why? And the answer is simple. It's because the system broke. From 2018 to 2024, temporary residents jumped from 3.3% to 7.5% of Canada's population. And this huge surge in non-permanent residents crushed housing supply. It sent rents through the roof. The Bank of Canada even acknowledged this correlation between strong population growth and how it was supporting inflation and rental prices. They were sounding the alarms for the Canadian government far before policymakers ever did anything about it. And Canada's budget even admits this, stating that the pace of arrivals began to exceed Canada's capacity to absorb and support newcomers. But it doesn't end here. CBC also just revealed that Ottawa is seeking mass visa cancellation powers, targeting fraud from India and Bangladesh. Rejection rate just hit a record 74%. 74% of Indian student visa applications in August were rejected, the highest refusal rate globally. So Canada is rejecting more Indian international student applications than any other country as a percentage of the total application. And you had economists warning that temporary migration was powering almost all of Canada's job growth, but it was also contributing to this huge imbalance in the labor pool. And the idea here is that immigration is no longer sacred to Canada's economy. And we can't just pretend that Ottawa and the federal Liberal Party acted alone. I think Doug Ford's government really abused or allowed the abuse of the foreign student loophole, which allows private colleges basically to balloon their international student populations, and it automatically issues them a student visa. Here's the new reality. Canada's economic growth model, the one that we built on population growth to prop up our GDP at the expense of our GDP per capita, that model is dead. Housing demand will cool, GDP will slow, and the immigration miracle that propped up everything from rents to GDP is going to be gone. I would say at this point, it would be unreasonable to not expect a recession as a result of this. Do I think that this is a necessary and a good policy decision? Absolutely. Am I trying to outline to you that there are consequences to this that I think you might want to be aware of? Yes. So let's dig into what the numbers actually say here. The 2025 budget locks permanent resident as admissions at 380,000, down from Trudeau's 500,000 target. And temporary admissions, so students, temporary foreign workers, and asylum claimants are going to be halved. And that collapse in inflows is really what you see in chart 17. Population growth plunging from over 3% to near zero by 2026. This is a structural reset on the way that Canada has grown our economy, and very much the way that the real estate market has relied on growth, from rents getting pushed up and from excess demand being present from too many people trying to consume too few homes. Between 21 and 24, population growth accounted for virtually all of Canada's GDP expansion. And without it, I think that Canada is now going to really reveal our true productivity problem. Canada's immigration system was originally built for merit-based entry. This kind of slow, selective, sustainable system. And over time, so you used to have this like scoring system where the majority of immigrants came through this CRS economic score, and it determined their viability of succeeding in Canada's economy. And it was a little bit more slow and selective. And over time, it morphed into this volume machine with recruiters, private colleges, labor brokers, a ton of fraud taking place. And the budget admitted that the complexity has grown and efficiency has waned. By 2024, 1 in every 13 people in Canada wasn't a citizen or a permanent resident. And this kind of growth can't coexist without record housing shortages, too much stress on infrastructure, healthcare falling apart, schools getting overloaded. Then you think about things like public transit, general public services, et cetera. So politically, it became very unmanageable, and cutting intake became the only clear lever left when the policymakers realized that there was no way for them to keep up with the system that they broke. And then things got really interesting. The fraud narrative really gave Ottawa cover to mass cancel visas from India and Bangladesh, with student agents under investigation and entire fake college networks being exposed. And this led to a 74% refusal rate in Indian international students. And this whole scandal had really flipped public opinion almost overnight. Suddenly, even moderate Canadians wanted caps on international students. And if you go back through history, there's always been this pattern that every boom built on cheap labor eventually ends with protectionism and a slowdown. And I think Ontario deserves a bit of a spotlight here. Doug Ford's government leaned on international student revenue to prop up the private college system. Developers and small towns cashed in a lot. Colleges obviously saw like thousands of % growth in their international students. And now the same regions are facing ghost campuses and empty rentals, and you literally cannot lease a student rental in a lot of these cities. Population growth was very much the lifeblood of Canadian GDP growth. If you remove it, Canada's economic engine stalls. And we really were doing this like to keep GDP propped up at the expense of GDP per capita, because you were adding so many people that our GDP wasn't outgrowing the growth of people. So again, population was growing faster than GDP, which meant that your GDP per capita was falling. And it's basically been falling since the peak of the pandemic, to the point where we're at like the same per capita GDP as we were in 2016, 17. So we've seen no economic growth on a per person basis in 10 years. For newcomers, this also means slower labor force expansion. The Bank of Canada even observed this. The highest unemployment rates in the country are from newcomers and the youth. So for the first time in a decade, the housing market might face real demand destruction, not just from interest rates, but also from demographics. And Carney's language in the budget, taking back control, sustainable levels, capacity to absorb, this mirrors a lot of that global populist pivot that we're seeing. And very much, I mean, this, along with a lot of the stuff that they're doing on housing, which I'm going to talk about in another video, really, from my perspective, mirrors that sort of move where they're pulling a lot from Poilievre's playbook. So all in all, immigration is about to change massively in Canada's economy. Immigration built modern Canada over the last couple of years, but unchecked, it completely broke the systems that sustained it. And now the pendulum is swinging hard in the other direction. The boom is over. The drawbridge is up, and Canada is about to learn what happens when growth stops and what it actually looks like when we don't have an economy that is growing without this perpetual inflow of more people, more consumers, more workers, more cheap labor. Let me know what you think. I'm curious to get your take in the comments. Do you think that they're going to achieve these numbers? Do you think that they're going to reduce immigration as significantly as they say they are? And if so, what do you think the economic impact is going to be in Canada? As always, I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video, and I'll get you another one as soon as I possibly can.